Angie in Richmond is next up on Willard and Dibs. Hi, Angie. What you doing?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Sure can.
I got a couple issues. The first is that, the last few times this happened, it wasn't instigated by Draymond. And I think that context matters. The second thing is, why isn't Nurkic being called for what he did to Brandon? He had him in practically a chokehold underneath the basket and wasn't even called, a foul wasn't even called. That's ridiculous.
Angie, I hear what you're saying, but can I ask you a question? Like, this is always the way that I've sort of handled situations like these. If a friend comes to me and says, my boss is awful, I'm leaving my job. And then they get a new job. And within 3 months, my boss is awful, I'm leaving my job. And they get a new job. And then 3 months go by, I think my boss is awful, I'm leaving my job. How many times, even if those bosses did have bad moments, how many times has that happened before you go, gee, what's the common thread here? Do you know what I mean?
I do, but I still think that, Draymond's been given sort of like this story and everybody just runs with it. And so, yeah, he's got Nurkic grabbing on his waist. He turns around to do something. He accidentally smacks him, but everybody takes it to the nth degree instead of like looking at the context of it.
Yeah, but you're adding your perspective in that it was an accident. I will tell you, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I'll tell you a lot of people, I would argue most of them don't agree with that assessment that it was an accident. You know what I mean? Like, and Angie,
okay.
you're and thanks, Angie. You're completely allowed to be a Draymond fan.
Of course.
That's completely allowed.
And whatever happened with Nurkic and Brandon under the basket, if it was worthy of a flagrant, then fine. If it's even worthy of a flagrant 2, then great. Maybe he can get a flagrant 2 after the fact, but he's not going to get suspended indefinitely no matter what happened off the ball under the basket because of the reputation. And Draymond is suspended indefinitely because of what's happened over his last 26 games of basketball. A stomp last year, a choke this year, and now a punch or a flail, whatever you want to call it. It happened, accidental or on purpose. It's in the eye of the beholder. Oh. The league sees it as, like you said, it's an image thing for the league. And as much as it gets people talking, they don't want the league talked about for this.
No.
They'd rather have us talk about the in-season tournament and how great that was.
Or just, the individuals, the players, the basketball, the show. This is an entertainment entity, and it's not boxing. And that's why I was saying earlier that in this particular situation, the Jordan Poole situation last year does come into this. It does. He wasn't suspended. The league didn't see it as one of their issues to oversee. But I can tell you what they do feel. They're in the middle of negotiating a multi-billion-dollar TV contract, and they don't want their players hauling off and assaulting each other on the internet. That is very, very, very bad. It's very bad. And so all of the acts, 26 games, you're right, but it goes all the way back. It's everything. It's LeBron's you-know-whats and everything else. It's the whole resume, and they finally decided, dude, you got it. You need anger management. One other note that just came down courtesy of Chris Haynes. This is a little interesting. During this suspension, Draymond Green will be allowed to practice.
Okay.
So he can stay with the team and just not play in the games.
Yeah. And I think that's part of, honestly, the therapeutic aspect of this because, you know this, Mark, you've been to therapy. We've all gone through it. Mm-hmm. Part of being therapized is being in a nurturing, comfortable, loving environment. And for Draymond Green, that's the Golden State Warriors. And so if you're going to isolate him and prevent him from being around the team, I don't think that helps him in his cause to get better.
I think you're right. Absolutely. You know what I mean? If this is kind of the tone they're going to take, then this absolutely makes sense. It's like, hey, put a big Warrior Snuggie around him. And let's try, instead of playing hardball, instead of tough love, let's try soft love with Draymond Green and see if that works, because the tough love doesn't work. It hasn't to this point. If you're just joining us, Draymond Green suspended indefinitely by the league. He will be allowed to practice. He will meet, along with his agents, with Mike Dunleavy and representatives from the NBA tomorrow, and they will start to build a path toward his return. He will need to meet certain criteria before the league even considers letting him back on the court to play a basketball again. And we are taking your calls right here on Willard and Dibs, reacting to all of it. Let's go to Angel on the freeway. Hey, Angel, what's going on? Angel, you there? Okay, that's disappointing. Gene in Oakland. Hey, Gene. Dog park?
Just came from the dog park, guys.
I know it's getting dark out there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is getting dark. So, listen, I predicted that you would get at least 7 games suspension and maybe more. So I'm not at all surprised this has happened. And the more I've listened to you guys and the more is coming out on this, the more, frankly, happy to see that this happened. I think it's in Dre's best interest. I mean, I love the guy. I've been one of his biggest supporters over the years. But I think this is what's best for him and ultimately probably what's best for the team. But I think it also represents an utter and complete failure on the part of Steve Kerr and the organization for not holding him accountable long before now. I mean, you can go back to the punch of last year, for which he was never punished. In fact, you could say he was rewarded because he didn't have to play a couple of preseason games. But So, I mean, this is nuts. I mean, really, they should have taken accountability for his behavior. They should have required him to meet certain goals along the way, and they should have they should have suspended him after that punch last year. So I'm really disappointed in the organization, but I'm happy the league is finally stepping in. I'm glad they're doing something before this maybe grew into a Kermit Alexander, Rudy Tomjanovich situation. And for those who don't know what the hell I'm talking about, I mean, Kermit almost killed the guy, right? You don't want to see that. So
no,
this is
definitely
good.
not.
I'm happy to see it, and I hope at the end of this, we will see a new man, and this won't happen again.
Thanks, Gene.
Yeah, Gene, thanks always.
That's always a tough one for me in terms of, like, if they would have suspended Draymond after the Jordan Poole punch, and I thought that they should have, would that have prevented all of these other events from happening? I can't argue. I could argue either side of it.
Totally.
The Golden State Warriors thought that the course of action that they took was the best one, not only for Draymond, but for them to win basketball games. And, they, I'm sure, went through all the scenarios, and they decided that punishing him in that fashion would not have been the thing to help him. And, I don't think that anything that they could have done then would have changed the way Draymond is. And honestly, Mark, I don't know if this course of action will change it either.
No,
it's up to Draymond.
I'm totally with you, where it's like I completely understand Gene's point and sort of the emotion behind it. But at the same time, I'm with you that I have my doubts that would have done any good. And while I know that this is going to sound enabling, I do want to remind everybody where we were at that time. In other words, the Warriors were about to start a title defense. At that time, the Warriors were not like, is Draymond still good? Are we still viable? Are we getting too old? They were 3 months removed from a title. So Draymond was considered an imperative player and a high-level title defense, preseason NBA championship favorite. Season was about to start. Now, does that all sound like an excuse? Maybe it does, but the bottom line is that's how sports work, and fans usually actually push for that. You don't want your high-level players suddenly removed from the team unless they've done something that is like going to put them in jail.
Right.
Now, you could argue that this could have or should have. Out on the street, maybe it would, but that's not the backdrop of all this. So it doesn't excuse the Warriors. Could they have punished him more? Absolutely. But you're talking about some people that were all riding on a really high horse at that time, and there was a lot on the line, and they weren't willing to risk it, and I get that.
Plus,
I get it.
You don't know if that course of action is going to eradicate the behavior that you're trying to tamp down. And that ultimately is what you have to decide in terms of disciplining any player at any level. I've coached a lot of high school, and I've had problems with players. I've had players who have needed discipline, and each player needs a different level of discipline. Some can go the tough love. Others, you got a soft play. It depends on the individual. And with Draymond Green, what they have tried has not worked in terms of his behavior. Now, it has worked in terms of 4 championships, and that's where you got to kind of you got to toe the line here, because you need Draymond, but you can't have Draymond acting like this. And so you try to allow it, and you try to handle it in-house as much as you can, and it gets to this point where the league says enough is enough, and now the league steps in and drops the hammer.
Sanjay in Tracy, next up on Willard and Dibs. Hey, Sanjay, what's going on?
Hey, guys. Yes, I'm heading to the Sun soccer game, but I was listening to this wonderful show. I agree with the NBA that they, whatever the action they took in for Draymond Green's suspension, I think it will be at least 10 games. Not in December. He might play maybe end of Jan or something. But I think I want to. I agree with the last caller who mentioned that. I think it's some responsibility and accountability goes to the organization, who did not draw accountability from Draymond when last time he punched Jordan Poole. And even after that, there's some incidents, like 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago. No, I think he needed to have a message sent, and I think this is the right stuff. And I honestly think it's good for the team, because it's a distraction right now, playing with him. Players like Jonathan Kuminga and Moody, I think this is a great chance for them to step up and help the team win some games. That's the way I think the direction is.
Yeah, Sanjay,
Thanks, Sanjay.
Don't forget to turn right, by the way. Thank you, Sanjay.
In 300 feet.
Yeah, 300. I think it's probably there by now.
You would hope.
Yeah, make sure you turn right. Don't miss that turn, or else you'll be suspended indefinitely.
I always have a hard time with the organization getting the blame, because Draymond Green is a grown-up. Draymond Green is an adult, and the organization's job is to put out an entertaining product and win basketball games. Draymond is entertaining, and he helps you win games. So what is their ultimate responsibility in terms of Draymond's behavior? The number one thing that I think that they should be responsible for is not protecting Jordan Poole. And because he is a fellow employee of the organization. So when they didn't do that, when they didn't punish Draymond for that, then that's a choice they made. And ultimately, it affected Jordan Poole in certain tangible ways, and he played a certain way, I think, because he got punched and nobody had his back. And that's a course of action they took. But all the rest of the Draymond stuff, Draymond's a 32-year-old man.
Yep.
He's responsible for his own actions.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, because, and listen, I understand if you feel this way, but like going back to what even Gene said, like this is an ultimate failure of Steve Kerr and the organization. Hold on a second. Tap the brakes there. They haven't been able to get him to do this. Well, wait a minute. That's not first and foremost on them. That's first and foremost on him. You know what I mean? Like, how many times have we heard people go, you got to sit him down and talk to him?
Right,
Do
right.
you all have any idea how many times they've done that? I mean, blue in the face 10 times over. Blue in the face 10 times over. They suspended him for Kevin Durant. They've been round and round in circles about all of this stuff. And they've had his back, and then at other times they haven't. They largely have had his back. And now the NBA is saying, we've got your back, but you need help. And so I'd love to know what a head back, if this is like a mental health issue, I'm sorry. I don't ask my basketball coach to be a psychiatrist. Yes, they do need to manage egos, and I'd argue Steve has done that very well through the years.
Right.
But to get to the point where now we're blaming Steve Kerr because Draymond Green has not been able to figure this out, That feels a little unfair to me.
Exactly. If you or I or anybody else here at the station is having problems off the air, it's not up to our boss, Matt Nahigian, to solve the problems. It is up to him to support us and give us the latitude to handle our problems, do what we need to do to come into work and be the best that we can be. But if I'm having problems at home, it's not up to my boss to step in and fix that issue. Or if somebody here has a kid who has trouble getting up for school, or another person's got this issue or that issue, it's not up to your employer. It's the same thing with the NBA team. If Draymond has anger issues, that's up to Draymond to fix. And if it bleeds over into his job and it affects his team and his franchise, well, then it becomes a league issue and a team issue.
I'm not saying that others don't have a hand in this, but if you want to point the finger at one individual, you start with Draymond.
Exactly.
You start with Draymond Green.
We're dealing with a 32-year-old man.
Yep. Jeff in Albany. Hey, Jeff, what's going on? You're on with Willard and Dibs.
Hi, great. Thanks. I'm going to agree with a lot of the other callers. I think this is a good thing. It's at least a year overdue. And it's good because it's going to, ideally help Draymond. But look, if it doesn't, if we don't address it now, it would just happen in a playoff series, and then we'd watch him blow a playoff series for us again or something like that. But I do have a question. But first, I got to have my I told you so moment, which is I called in at the end of last season and said, this is off-season work. He needs some kind of nonviolent communication training or counseling, or I don't know what it is, something along those lines. And I don't know that it helps to blame leadership, but I think this is definitely another indication that the team is lacking some kind of psychological leadership. And you look at Kerr and you look at Dunleavy, and it's always time spent on questions of the roster, getting the right guys in, and moving the chess pieces around the board. But I want to know y'all's opinion. Who's the leader who's off the court, who cannot just talk to Green, talk to Clay? He's got his issues. Wiggins, he's got some slumps. Steph, sometimes he's looking a little wobbly. So who's got that relationship with the players in the locker room or wherever it is? They really speak to them on the level. And last thing is, one thing I brought up before was, could Kerr call in a favor from Phil Jackson or something, like somebody who can really get to the core of the psychology.
Oh gosh, let me jump in on that, Jeff. Phil Jackson would be an absolute gas can in this locker room. Phil was brilliant, but Phil had his way, and believe you me, he rubbed plenty of people the wrong way. He had two absolute generational players when he was with the Lakers, two generational players when he was with the Bulls. Yes, he managed egos pretty well, but I don't know that he and Draymond would be a good mix. Phil walking around handing out books is probably not what Draymond would want. Some really interesting points there. And let me say this. First of all, you asked, who's got that voice? His name's Bob. He's not with the team anymore.
Right.
So that's a problem. Steph has the cachet to do it. Don't know if he wants to do it or if he has done it. The other side to this, though, I can only state this as a perception. I don't know it to be fact. But based on the conversations we've had, this idea of, boy, they should have gotten to Draymond in the offseason for some work and some counseling, I really firmly believe they did. I really, really do. I mean, Steve addressed this with us last time about he's going to do the work. Like, there's work to be done off the court. I'm not going to give you the details of what it is, but it's being done. I really think the Warriors have tried it all. And to this point, it hasn't worked.
Right. And I like the caller's description of non-confrontational language training. So when Yusuf Nurkic is grabbing his hip, Draymond stops and turns around and says, Yusuf, when you pull my hip like that, it stirs feelings of anger within me. And I really want to swivel around and smack you in the face right now, but I'm working really hard on my non-confrontational language in these incidents. So if you wouldn't mind removing your hand from my hip so that I can receive this pass in the post extended, I'd appreciate that, Yusuf.
That's a shot clock violation. I do want to let you know. I was counting. That was more than 24 seconds. We're going the other way. Yeah. But other than that, good idea.
I mean, and he's not wrong, but we are talking about pro sports, and Draymond Green plays with a certain level of aggressiveness. So you're asking a guy to be aggressive, guard guys who are 80 pounds heavier and 7 inches taller, but also be able to deflect in the moment and be able to contain yourself. You're asking a lot of a guy who's known one way ever since he was a youth in Saginaw.
James in Hayward gets to weigh in. Hey, James, thanks for calling. What's up? James?
In Hayward.
In Hayward? Gone. Is it BriB or BriB?
BriB.
BriB. San Francisco.
Like the cheese.
What up, BriB? I've had some BriB, and I had it twice. So I had BriB at about 3 o'clock today. What's up, BriB?
Hey, I just wanted to get you guys' opinion on a different view of it. So, a lot of the players that he's had incidents with, right, I consider them the non-conflict type of guys. So, let's just say he had these conflicts with, like, Isaiah Stewart or Dylan Brooks or Patrick Beverly, and he gets ejected, right? He gets ejected from the game. Would his punishment be more of a wash with those type of players? So then now that he's had these incidents with these guys as a non-conflict guy, so now we're tallying up every single time he gets in trouble. But would he have gotten as much in trouble as he did with those type of players?
I think
it's a fair question, BriB.
Yeah, it's a good question, BriB, and thank you for calling. But my perception is that, and sometimes I think we forget this as Warriors fans because he's one of ours. But all those guys you're bringing up, even Dylan Brooks, nationally, Draymond's the guy.
Of course,
that is enemy number one as far as on-court behavior. I'd also push back just a little bit that a lot of the guys he's gotten in an incident with are not the supposed instigators. Sabonis does weird stuff out there.
Sure.
Steven Adams, absolutely physical
player,
instigator on the floor. So, but yeah, Draymond's reputation is ahead of everybody's on this stuff.
I do think that BriB's onto something in terms of if he was going at these other real tough customers
Dylan
and it was
Brooks.
a fair back and forth.
Yeah.
These are not back and forth incidents. He stomped on Sabonis while he was lying on the court.
Well, he had his piece in that, though, too. He did.
Oh, he grabbed his foot.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I know, but
don't do that. But
okay,
yeah,
don't do that.
I'm not excusing it.
I know you're not,
Yeah.
but it's not like two guys squaring up or two guys going at it. The guy was on the ground.
Well,
and he got
last night, Nurkic, in my opinion, I know, he grabbed his jersey. He did nothing.
He grabbed his hip.
He did nothing outside of what people do on a basketball court. It's a physical game. He did nothing. So, that one has to go away.